This country went bankrupt from a stupid concert and other really bad ideas. In 1982, Nauru's annual GDP exceeded $27,000 per person. That's 87% higher than the USA. But 35 years later, they were the second poorest country in the world. What happened? In 1896, a cargo officer found an interesting rock on the coast of Nauru and took it home. 3 years later, a minerals expert happened to see the rock, which at that time was being used as a doorstop, and immediately recognized it as the highest quality phosphate ore he had ever seen. Tests revealed Nauru's surface was covered in this precious mineral, just waiting to be collected. Over the millennia, migrating birds had routinely taken bathroom breaks on this secluded island. As shifting tides repeatedly submerged the island, the poop calcified, making the land rich with materials commonly used in fertilizers and explosives. When the Nauruans realized they were sitting on a gold mine, the economy exploded. With billions of dollars to split between just 4,300 residents, the Nauruans became filthy rich. Countless workers came to help strip the land of phosphate. Profits were so lucrative the government began subsidizing everything possible. Schools, healthcare, transportation, and even newspapers all became free. Rent was capped at $5 a month, and everyone was granted the opportunity to study abroad at an elite university. As phosphate mining became increasingly efficient, the government had such an extreme surplus of funds that President Robert announced, "Taxation is unsuited to the Nauruan temperament." In 1982, the New York Times declared Nauru as the world's richest little isle. The people became so wealthy they stopped working altogether, relying entirely on foreign labor to continue all operations. At the peak of their prosperity, the government employed nearly half of the island's residents to oversee the distribution of funds to the other half. With nothing to do, 95% of Nauruans became overweight and 72% turned obese. But with mining operations rendering the vast majority of land uninhabitable, the people began to fear what would happen once their precious resources had been sucked dry. "It is a worry," Finance Minister James Bopp admitted, "but we have a motto in Nauruan. It means, tomorrow will take care of itself." Of course, officials knew better than to leave their future up to chance. The government assured the people they had plans to accumulate more than enough to maintain the present standard of living, even with an increased population. But as every seasoned investor knows, not every financial decision is guaranteed to yield a profit. Some are good, some are bad, and some are monumentally stupid. Most of the Nauru Phosphates Royalty Trust's investments fell into the last category. The government's top priority was establishing Nauru as a global tourist destination. If they only started a new international airline that recognized their home as a key location, the world would leap at the opportunity to tour the island's extensive phosphate mines. One attendant who worked for Nauru Airlines recounts it as one of the best jobs in the world. Flights were routinely 12 hours late, which, of course, was not a problem since they carried 0 passengers. Employees had few responsibilities beyond lounging in first class and raiding the kitchen. When Nauru Airlines failed to pull a profit for 20 consecutive years, financial advisor Duke Minks presented a 4-hour musical he had written. Somehow, he managed to secure several $1 million to bring this hastily written production to life. Art historians in the audience may have felt queasy midway through Act 1 when Leonardo da Vinci slapped the Mona Lisa on the bum and asked her to help me with my research, one critic wrote after attending the world premiere of Leonardo the musical. Before the performance was halfway through, most of the audience had departed. The president of Nauru was one of the few guests who sat through the entire musical. Afterward, he found himself convinced this show will tour the world. Sadly, this did not happen. The Independent called it a gawky love story. The Sunday Times said it was mind-numbingly boring. The Guardian concluded, Leonardo is a dodo. Even worse, none of these investments, if you could call them that, were financed by proceeds from the sale of phosphate. We are advised by economists that it makes more sense to borrow than to dig into capital, President Robert explained. When phosphate reserves were finally depleted, the government was nearly $1 billion in debt. The Nauruans had become accustomed to an affluent lifestyle, but all that came to an abrupt end. By the time mining operations had ceased, their home had been turned into a barren wasteland. Even if the people were willing to work, there was little for them to do. Phosphate is essential for plant growth, but the ground had been completely robbed of this mineral. Except for fish, all food had to be imported. Grocery stores were nearly empty, and the few products they carried were prohibitively expensive. In a desperate attempt to return the island to its glory days, the Nauruan government established a new banking system that promised not to record any transactions. In 1998, the Russian mafia transferred $70 billion through the Nauru Agency Corporation. But when the US applied the harshest sanctions ever imposed on any country, Nauru was forced to withdraw from money laundering. Easy come, easy go. The Nauruans got lucky. The accidental discovery of phosphate slingshot them out of poverty and into lucrative wealth. None of the Nauruans understood the value of money. They enjoyed the luxuries of living in a first-world country, but they didn't know how to cherish their resources. They had confused investing with becoming famous. They wanted to become renowned for something, whether it was tourism, musical talent, or money laundering. None of these were sustainable. In 2018, an Australian mining company visited Nauru and noticed how the island's underwater reserves are still rich with phosphate. Although technology needed for deep-sea mining is still under development, the Nauruan government hopes to resume phosphate exports by 2025. As Nauru's leadership looks to get the island back on its feet, the people anticipate resuming the lifestyle they had once enjoyed. We can only hope they have learned their lesson from last time.